All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second newsletter. I'm very excited to be back here. And I wanted to say thank you as well for all of you guys who filled out the type form. I know it was a lot of very introspective questions, but I think it really allowed me to take a step back, read through them, and just understand where some of you guys are. And I think primarily one of the reasons I wanted to do it was I wanted to see how correlated my journey was with a lot of yours. And I think what I realized after taking a look through some of the responses was I can very heavily relate to a lot of the problems that you guys experience, not all of them. And I know for some of you who know my backstory, I mean, I started my e-commerce and dropshipping business basically from scratch. I didn't ask for any handouts or things of that nature, but at the same time, I can always acknowledge the fact that I had the privilege of having a roof over my head, parents that did well for themselves. And due to that, I guess I still had a fallback. Now, I never asked for anything. And funny enough, when I first started out, I think I was around $7,000 in debt on my Tangerine line of credit. Tangerine is a bank here in Toronto, if you guys are not familiar. And I was just very committed to making it work. Now, I wanted to kind of go over a few of the things that I noticed with some of your guys' responses. And I noticed that there was like a lot that were of the same issue. And like, you know, people from all kinds of different backgrounds that were experiencing the same things. And maybe some of the ones that I could relate to the most and give my best feedback on. So with that being said, let's just jump right into it. I made a quick note of some of the things that you guys were having issues with. And the first one, and honestly, probably one of the ones that I feel very strongly about, was a lot of you have no capital to start e-com. Maybe you don't have much money set aside. And I want to be very transparent here. There's a few different industries, and I'm sure if you guys have been in the space of online entrepreneurship and looking at what you should do for a living, and maybe you've spent some time researching, you know, the best business models and things alike, you will have maybe noticed by now that e-commerce is not one of the ones where you can start off with $0. Are there businesses that, you know, are very less capital intensive where you can probably start with like 20, 30 bucks? Sure. Yeah. I know some agencies and things like that. That's the case. Now, you know, I'm not going to get into like the pros and cons of the businesses yet, but what I will say is that is definitely not one of the things that e-commerce has the perk of being. And I know you have these people online that say like do organic drop shipping and blah, blah, blah. I mean, over a long enough period of time, maybe you can make that work and build some capital, but I would just be very cognizant of the fact that it's probably not the business model to start, and the real money in e-commerce is made through paid advertising, all right? Organic can work, but usually that's a secondary omni-channel that supplements your main income stream, right? Or your main revenue channel. So just keep that in mind. You know, if you were to ask me a rough ballpark of what you need to start, I would say like having $1,000 set aside is like sufficient enough to at least start getting in the trenches and starting to, you know, post your first ads, create your first store, and everything else that comes along with that. But again, with that in mind, like don't set $1,000 aside and then quit your job, right? Something I feel very passionately about is making sure that you have a stream of income while you're starting your business, all right? And even if it is a business that's a lot less capital intensive, like you don't need any money to start. Like I heavily believe in always having an income stream. And then once you start to have at least some cash flow coming in, you can start to decide like, okay, can this support the things that I want in life, my primary needs, my wants, things like that. And then you can transition into like quitting your job and things like that. I mean, I kept my career going until I was at a point where I think I had made my first 100K like liquid saved in my bank account. And then I was like, you know what, maybe I can actually transition to this full time, right? So that's one of the main things. Keep that in mind. Second thing that I noticed was a lot of you guys are very overwhelmed with a shit ton of information that you see online. And I've been there too. And you know what? Instead of actually painting this as like I'm going to give you the right information, you know, blah, 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 because at the end of the day, I'm just another person giving my own input. What I will say is if you guys are struggling with an issue like this, just in general, understand that putting things into practice and applying the information that you receive online is going to be the best determining factor of whether something works or whether it doesn't. All right. So if you watch 10 YouTubers on e-commerce, let's say, and 10 of them tell you 10 different things to do, and you actually applied and spent some time with each one of their solutions or answers to your questions and saw which one worked for you and just looked at the data, which worked, which didn't, all of a sudden you have a more concrete idea of what works and what doesn't, right? Or at least you've been moving, or at least you're starting to move in the right direction. So just honestly as like an overall life point, when you have a lot of conflicting information and maybe you're just not at a point yet where you know how to vet out whether the information is good or not, simply just apply the information yourself, take the time to do it and see what works out for you. and you're going to have a lot better trajectory and start to understand whose information works, whose doesn't, and then you can make more educated decisions from then going forward. All right. So that's just kind of like a light point for a lot of you guys, because a lot of people were asking this question saying, there's 10 people giving 10 different types of advice online. I don't know who's actually doing what they're doing. I don't know who's not. And one thing I'll say too is sometimes there's people who don't actually do what they're talking about and can still give out very good information, right? That could help you in your journey. So don't be so concerned about, whether someone's doing what they're doing, rather than if the information is helpful, applicable, and actually leads you in the right direction with your business, okay? And then the final one, I'm gonna keep it a little bit short today, was the uncertainty about whether it will work, okay? And I know this is one that we all struggle with. Maybe you're scared to make the next move. You just don't know what to do next. You're uncertain about whether it will work or not. And guys, that's kind of what separates the ones that have extreme amounts of success from the ones that don't. Now, I sit here today, I have most of the things I want. I don't think I live the most extravagant lifestyle. I know to some of you may be watching, like, this is what success is to you. And to me, I'm living the life I wanted to live. But again, I have friends who make millions of dollars more than me. They have way nicer cars than me, and everything else that's on that spectrum, whether it be in one direction or the other. But I think finding that lifestyle that works for you and then understanding what it takes to get there is very important. And then understanding that to have that lifestyle, which is not very ordinary, there are risks that will need to be taken, and understanding the fact that those risks don't come with certain outcomes. All right. So I remember very vividly 3 years ago, I believe it was 2021. I had just graduated university, and I didn't get a return offer from this bank that I used to work at. So I used to work as a commercial banking intern at a big national bank, and they didn't give me the return offer. So I was at a very tricky crossroads, and I didn't exactly know what the next step was in my life. However, I did have a little bit of success coming through with e-commerce. And I kind of decided in that moment to just tell my parents, because they were kind of on my ass, and they kind of put me in a position where it was, you need to understand what you're going to do next in your life and what your career is going to be. And this is kind of that crossroads for you. And I remember just telling them, I'm starting to have a little bit of success here with e-com, and I'm confident I can turn this into something bigger in the next few years. And, it was a conversation that had to be had, and it wasn't an easy one to have. And again, at the end of the day, I was taking a risk for the next few years of not having a solidified income and a career path where you have a set amount coming in every month. And yeah, 3 years later, I'm able to live a life that's not very ordinary and that I couldn't have lived had I gone down that regular path. Now, is there a chance this might have not worked out for me? Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, does that chance shrink as you continue to put effort in and work in over time? 100%. So just understand, guys, having a very linear focus on what you want to do, understanding that there's always going to be a risk and there's no certain path. And at the end of the day, you can listen to all the information online from every single person in the world who's made it. And what you'll start to see too is these cliches start to come and filter down to most people that are at a higher level. So what I mean by that is, if you go listen to a podcast from Jeff Bezos, or you listen to a podcast from someone in some online space that you watch, and they've both achieved phenomenal levels of success, you will start to see that, you hear the cliche things like putting hard work in, or taking a risk, or betting on yourself. And I remember before I had achieved any semblance of a success, I used to just look at those sayings and phrases and quotes and be like, this seems so cliche and everybody says the same thing. But then you start to realize, and at the point that I'm at right now, I've started to realize too, that's all it comes down to, right? And having that linear focus and just working hard in the right path, on the right vehicle, is very important. So to branch off of that, that means not spending your time on something that might not even have the potential to become something big for you. So for example, with the e-commerce space, I know hundreds of people, or close to hundreds of people, that are performing at the 7-figure plus a month range, okay? Personally, right? Now, if I were to go into a car wash detailing business, there's maybe 1 or 2 businesses that I know of that make even close to that much money in this entire region that I stay in, okay? Or at least that I know personally. I mean, there's a couple, right? So you can focus on either and make both work, but choosing the vehicle that's gonna have a bigger win at the end, if you were to succeed with it, in my opinion, is so important, which is why I preach that e-com is such a great game to go into. It's because if you do decide to commit your life to something and learn a skill set, choose one where the outcome potential, if you were to succeed, is the biggest, right? So I know damn well, and I haven't even gotten to my end goals yet when it comes to this industry, but I know that if I continue to improve, like the world is my oyster, because at the end of this tunnel is 8, 9 figure exits and everything else that comes along with that. So I won't take up too much of your guys' time. I'm going to be answering a few more questions, releasing a couple, and then I have my Q&A that I mentioned as well on Thursday, where I'll be answering some questions, talking about ecom a little bit, and then revealing something pretty cool at the end that I think some of you might have quite a keen interest in. So until then, keep grinding, keep your head up, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks so much.